Welcome to Commander Central, episode 270, and today we're taking a look at Patreon supporter Sean Biddick's Zareth Sans Rogue Mill deck. I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
Chris, happy Friday, buddy. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good.
Did you survive pre-release weekend?
I did. It was a very, very long weekend. I missed out on going fishing with a buddy of mine and all that fun jazz, so...
The fish will still be there unless he caught, like, the world record one.
Yeah, that's
then
true.
I can feel bad why you would want to be there.
It's more of everyone's busy and stuff, so when you get a chance to do stuff like that with your buddies, you try to do it. But I missed out this time, so...
Right. Did you get any sweet pulls from your Modern Horizon pre-release stuff?
So I opened one pre-release kit, and I don't even remember what I pulled. Oh, a foil ignorable hierarch. It's not ignorable, but I like calling it ignorable. It's ignoble hierarch. But I pulled a foil.
That's the Jund one, right?
Yes, it's the Jund Goblin.
Cool. I just grabbed I had to run to Target on my lunch break to grab some stuff. So I grabbed a bundle because they had like 30 of them sitting on the shelf. I was shocked. My best pulls out of 10 packs were an old framed Arid Mesa.
Okay.
A Cabal Coffers. And a Grief.
Nice. Those are some pretty good pulls.
I'm like, okay, that made the spend worth it. And those giant D20s are pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I know we got, when I go in today before we open up, I gotta get everything set up because we'll be selling all our product today because today is actually release. So,
yes.
Should be fun.
Yeah. So for those of you out there who want to talk about what sweet Modern Horizons 2 cards you pulled at your pre-release or what you plan on picking up now that the product is actually out, where can they tell us, Chris?
Well, you can reach us on a multitude of social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. You can search us up on Facebook, CMDR Central. You can find us online at cmdrcentral.com, and you can also find us on YouTube by searching CMDR Central.
You can also head over to patreon.com/CMDR Central and check out our reward tiers, such as a Decks You Play show, just like this one, or just joining our community to talk with us and play some virtual EDH.
Yeah, indeed.
We do have a couple new patrons to say hello and thank you to. So hello to Nicholas Asberg and Colton McCarthy.
Hello. Thank you very much for supporting us.
Yes, it means a lot. It means I might wear pants one day.
Yep. I also want to give a shout out to Harley Summers. This nice gentleman came in, I think it was Friday and Saturday for pre-release. He's actually an over-the-road trucker, stopped by, called us up at the shop, asked where he could park his rig. He parked his rig and hung out with us for the weekend, so it was fun to see him. I got to play one EDH game with him, but, it was pre-release, so I couldn't really jam too much more than that, so it was fun just to get to meet people who listen and enjoy the game as much as we do.
That is awesome. That's so cool when we get to meet other people, and we actually had a couple other listeners stop in the shop this past Tuesday. Bill and his son Dennis came down from the Twin Cities area to play some EDH with us, so that was good to catch up with them. They try to visit us at least once a year when the world is getting back to normal.
Yep, sorry I missed the game with y'all. Work comes first and then fun.
Yep, exactly. Well, should we jump into this deck tech, Chris?
I suppose. I mean, Dana's off, and I don't know where he is right now. He's going and buying a house for his mom or something. I don't know what's going on with that.
Yeah, so you've probably noticed no Dana this week. His mom is moving to a new place here in town, and she's doing all the complicated bank paperwork today to close on it. So she just wanted her son there to make sure everything goes smoothly, which I totally understand.
Yeah,
so
need the shark known as Dana there, so he's like, "Oh, I'm watching you guys. Mess with my mom, I take you out."
Or she'll just take you out on a ride on the Harley that she might buy one day.
I hope she really does. I do.
Okay, so Sean submitted his Zareth San, the Trickster deck, and of course we always ask some questions, so the first question, like always, is what is their meta like, and he said, "My meta seems to be in flux. A lot of infinite combos in decks, but no one tutors for the infinite combo. I could see that changing in the next 6 months due to power creep. I would say most decks are in the 6 to 7 range, but we're getting closer to 8s every day."
That seems just basically what's happening right now everywhere that I've seen or other people that I've talked to is due to the simple fact that Wizards is printing more product and it seems like they're just power creeping it naturally. Everyone's just power creeping because it's like, this is a really good card. This should go in my deck. So, I mean, it comes down to the point when you talk to everyone in your play group and that, try to keep it within a reasonable thing and try not to power creep it. That's where I'm at with that kind of stuff.
For sure. Or you could take my approach and just don't update your decks until like 3 sets later. Like I finally put the last of the call time cards in my decks, so now I can start working on Strixhaven.
I'm kind of in the same boat with you on that, Max. I know both Mogus and Alesh are sitting there with a stack of cards that should go in, and I'm just like, I'm too lazy. The deck's already put together and I can play it, so why start swapping out cards?
Exactly.
So we were told, he really digs Zareth San. So the main goal of the deck is to make it, from a suboptimal commander to maybe a little bit better type of thing. Get as much value from your opponent's decks through milling and then stealing things. Which, and when we read Zareth San, you'll see exactly what we mean by stealing things.
Yeah, I remember when we first talked about this card way back during Zendikar Rising, and I was kind of interested in it, and then I, in typical Max fashion, only builds one deck every, 18 months, so this isn't going to happen for me. And finally, we always ask what should we focus on or try to fix with the deck, and Sean said my deck gets pretty focused on when I pull it out while playing. Everyone hates mill in my playgroup. I'm okay with the deck, but if you guys can think of a way to address maybe not being an arch enemy, I think is probably what's happening.
Yeah.
That would be great. And finally, for budget, no individual card more than $50 in our suggestions.
Okay. Easy peasy. So, first card I'm going to suggest is Underground Sea. Definitely need that in here. And
this was, we'll get to this, but it's kind of hard doing these budgets. You always think $50 is a lot, but when you look at some of these, what I would call cards that I just have copies of, $50 doesn't go very far when you check prices like, oh, this card is closing in on $40. Never mind.
Yeah, it was always amusing with, like the regulars at our shop who play Pokemon. Because years ago, Pokemon was never expensive, so they're like, oh, yeah, that's like a $10 card. I don't know if I want to buy it. And I'm like, I'll buy one, add it to my collection. And they're like, oh, how can you spend that kind of money? I'm like, have you ever seen what Magic costs? Man, this is like nothing.
Yeah. Okay, so let's read Zareth San the Trickster. He is a legendary creature merfolk rogue for 3 blue and a black, and he has a 4/4 body. He has Flash, and then activated ability for 2 blue and a black. You can return an unblocked attacking rogue you control to its owner's hand, and you can put Zareth San, the Trickster, from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. So not as good ninjutsu is how I would think about that.
Yep. Well, and it's also required from your hand, so it's not like the blue-black...
The Tiger Claw lady.
Yeah, the gal who comes out and everyone's like, oh, no, I flipped Draco and you die. And you're like, oh, no. And yeah, all that fun jazz.
And then he also has a second triggered ability that says whenever Zareth San deals combat damage to a player, you may put target permanent card from their graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So this is the part that Chris mentioned about the stealing stuff.
Yes. Steal, steal, steal. Rah, rah. I mean, it kind of fits, it's a rogue, and that's kind of what rogues do. If you've ever played D&D, a lot of people who play rogues, they go into sleight of hand, tricks and all that stuff, and stealing stuff, pickpocketing, all that fun jazz. So it kind of fits theme.
The one time I played D&D, I played as like a rogue. Because I'm like, cool, that's stealthy, I can do that. And we were doing like an intro one-shot, and we were at some bar, and the rest of my party participated in some drinking competition. And I said, so since half of the people who participated are passed out from drinking too much, can I just rob everybody? And the DM's like, sure, roll. And I rolled like a 17. He goes, you're successful. You robbed every participant.
Oh gosh, that's horrible.
My party didn't like me after that.
Well, they're all passed out. They should not have known. That's the big thing about D&D when people are playing. It's like if someone does something in real time, you got to go off of what your character's doing. You can't just sit and remember what they did in real time. And that's
right.
One of the things, like, it's hard to find a good group. And that's why I usually don't play with certain people, because they can't take the aspect away from, I saw you do that, but I didn't see you do that type of thing.
Exactly. Okay, but enough about D&D. We'll probably cover that later this summer when the Hidden Realms set comes out.
Oh, sure will. Our new podcast, Magic and D&D, what are the differences?
You're going to just drive that podcast because I don't know a single thing about D&D. Okay, but back to the deck. Let's start with the lands as always.
Sure thing.
What are we looking at here, Chris?
We got 36 lands. We have a Bajuka Bog, Command Beacon, Command Tower, Field of Ruin, Ghost Quarter, 14 islands, 1 Myriad Landscape, 1 Path of Ancestry, 1 Rogue's Passage, 1 Sanctum of Eternity, 1 Sunken Hollow, 11 Swamps, and a Tainted Isle.
I feel like this deck started as that pre-con that came, when Zendikar Rising came out. This seems like a very slowly upgraded land base for a pre-con deck.
Yes.
Just based on the true amount of basics in here, what do you think about this so far?
This land base definitely needs an upgrade of some sort. As I was looking through the notes, I saw that you put down, the duels. And we're not talking, ABR duels. We're talking, your regular newer duels that have come out, your shock lands, your fetch, like, for instance, like the Sunken Hollow that's in here, any of them that create double color but are cheaper in monetary value. So that would be like the first suggestion of something. Personally, for me, the first card I would jam in this deck and wouldn't even hesitate to put in here is Shizo Death Storehouse, which is a legendary land that gives a legendary creature fear. I would put this in a heartbeat, just for the simple fact of you want to hit with Zareth and steal something, because you get to cast it for free. You just get to take it. You don't even cast it, you just jam it into the battlefield. So the more ways that you have of getting through for damage to do that is better. And why not on a land that can be tutored up with an expedition map or other little things that can get it out. So a free, cheap, easy way of doing it.
Yeah, that definitely was a card I almost put down. I didn't, because when I went through the list, there are only, besides Zareth, there's only like 4 or 5 other legendary creatures. And the creature has to be legendary for Shizo. But if you go that straight up, not trying to do the flash in trick with Zareth, yeah, Shizo should definitely go right into this.
Yeah, well, and the way I look at it too, it does tap for mana too, so there's no reason not to play it. So just jam it in there. It's not a very expensive card, worth trying, and I guarantee someone's got it in a binder that's just sitting there collecting dust ready to be traded.
For sure. Yeah, and you touched on it, what I had written down, Chris. I have those cheaper duels, so the Watery Grave, the Drowned Catacombs, the Scry Temple, there's the Cycle Land from Amonkhet, and then there's a flip duel from Kaldheim in blue-black, I believe, as well.
Yes, there is. Definitely, I really like those flipping lands too a lot, the MDFC lands. I mean, that's pretty cool.
The Pathway lands, that's what they're called.
They're still MDFCs to me.
Yeah, and then another utility land I thought about adding, since he does want to do a little bit of mill aspect with this deck, is Nephalia Drownyard. That's the one from Innistrad where it's 1 blue-black, target player mills 2 cards.
Yes. That's actually not a bad one to try. I mean, the only thing I don't like about lands like that is that you're mana sinking into doing a really weak ability, whereas you could be casting other spells or putting permanents onto the battlefield with that mana instead.
Yeah, I definitely agree, but plays into what he wants to do, and it's a very inexpensive card.
Exactly.
I was really happy to see both Command Beacon and Sanctum of Eternity in this deck, just because it's good ways to get your commander out of the command zone and into your hand to use Zareth's ability.
That's for sure. I mean, repeatable ways. And like I said, they're tutorable with Expedition Map. And I'm sure there's other ones that I keep forgetting about. But Expedition Map's always popping in my head because Modern's so big right now that, it's the first thing that comes out. 1 mana, go search for any land. Oh, guess what? Now I'm playing the most fair deck in Modern where I go 1, 2, 7, I win. So...
Yeah, you can do that in EDH every now and then too, don't worry.
I'm sure it does not happen as often.
It's called Landfall. That's all you do.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Chris, where should we move on to next?
Wherever you would want to move on to next. How about I will choose, we go in order of our notes. So we're going to jump into artifacts.
Awesome. So there are 15 artifacts. We have an Arcane Signet, Dimir Signet, Expedition Map, Folio of Fancies, Herald's Horn, Mask of Riddles, Netherburn Altar, Nyx Lotus, Portal of Sanctuary, Soul Ring, Swiftfoot Boots, Thought Vessel, Trailblazer's Boots, The Wayfarer's Bauble, and Whisper Silk Cloak.
They're all good, except for there's one in here that I'm going to immediately mention, and I've never personally played this card, but I know that Dana has, and he gave me his, initial response to it and whether he liked it or not, and he's still kind of on the fence last time I talked to him about it, and that's Nyx Lotus. 4 mana rock that comes into play tapped, but you can tap, choose a color, add 1 mana, or add an amount of mana equal to your devotion of that color. So... personally, I'd rather have the Nykthos land over this because you're not sinking mana into it, as well as it's, easier to destroy artifacts. People pack more artifact destruction than land destruction in decks. So I'd rather have that, not to mention, as I've said, this is probably the 6th time I've said this now and people are going to hate me for it, but you can tutor it up as a land compared to the artifact in these colors, unless you're playing your demonics and other stuff, which I would rather be tutoring other key pieces of this deck over a mana rock for something like that.
Yeah, the Nyx Lotus was the first thing that jumped out to me as well. I agree, I've heard Dana's experiences with it. The biggest thing is it coming in tapped.
Yes.
And if you don't have a board state, it's not doing anything for you. It just sits there and does nothing. Where Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, the land at least produces colorless mana.
That is true. Yep. And then, if you do put a Nykthos in and other of those utility lands, you could add an Urborg in the deck. It was reprinted, so it stays within your monetary value that you're looking for. So you get black mana out of it as well. Which, looking at the overall deck, it seems it's pushed more into blue than black, so that doesn't really help any. But there are a lot of things in, black that give Swamp Walk and stuff, so that could be an aspect to look at as well.
Yeah. So some suggestions I had were ways to capitalize on Zareth San's ability. So the first being Stronic Resonator.
Yep.
2 mana, tap it to copy a triggered ability. Hit with Zareth, copy the ability, now you get 2 permanents. That's awesome. Whether it's 2 lands, 2 artifacts, 2 creatures, you're making great value there for 2 mana. And then another way to fuel the graveyard building would be an Altar the Brood. I don't think this is a deck where it's going to be abused like it is like when I played in Brago because of just all the ETB triggers, but if you can get that out early game and you're just playing a land and playing a rogue, you're milling everybody for 2 cards a turn.
Yes.
And then you hit with Zareth, they mill again. You play Zareth, they mill again. Now you have just more gas in the graveyards to go grab stuff with.
That is true. That is true indeed. So I like the idea of Alter the Brood. I went another route. I tried to stick more to a millish theme with cards that I put in here, just so you can get more of the ability triggers. I know that, Max said there were only X amount of rogues in the decks. You're not the ability of, flashing them from your hand to replace with the ninjutsu type of jazz isn't quite as effective. But if you can mill more as a sub-theme so then you can get those other cards with Zareth, I think is more of an aspect I'd rather be playing. So my suggestions are Mesmeric Orb, which is a 2-mana artifact. It's a very disgusting one. This affects you as well. But whenever a player untaps a permanent, they mill a card. So that includes lands, all that fun stuff. So just basic playing the game, that card's going to help you with the mill. The other one is Mind Crank, which is another one that's just basic gameplay. It's going to help you because it reads that any damage that would be done to your opponents, they mill that many cards as well. So damage is still done, but they still mill too. So, if your opponents are attacking each other, you're just sitting there back watching them mill each other. So those 2 for sure I would suggest putting in just to try and see if you like them or not. Mesmeric Orb can get a little tricky because you're milling yourself as well, but there are definitely cards within the game that allow you to shuffle your graveyard back into your deck, so it's not actually going to hurt you as much as it'll hurt your opponents.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, otherwise, I like this artifact package. The Netherborn Altar, I haven't actually seen anybody play this yet, so it's cool to see people playing it. That's the one where it's 1 and a black, you tap to put a soul counter on it, and then you put your commander into your hand from the command zone, so just another way to get Zareth out of the command zone.
Yep.
And then you lose 3 life for each soul counter on Netherborn Altar. So, it scales, but hey, if you only need to do it a couple times, that's perfect.
Yep. Another 2 that you could possibly put in here, and they're pretty much one and the same, just different CMCs on them, is Crystal Shard and Erratic Portal. They're both cheap, recurable, reusable outlets to actually bounce creatures from, play into your hand. So if you want to go more of that ninjutsu its route, you could do that, or just to protect Zareth San, so it doesn't keep going into the command zone. You can bounce it back to your heart or back to your hand. Both of them have 1 mana activation costs. I do believe Erratic Portal costs 4 or 5 CMC to cast, whereas Crystal Shard's only 2. So it's something to think about. You can also target opponent stuff too, but I think they have a way out of it. Like with Crystal Shard, they can pay 1 colorless to dodge it. So you could start taxing them in that route too if it was really a big thing.
Yeah, the nice thing about Crystal Shard is you can either do 3 generic and tap or just a single blue. So you get you get a cheaper way to do it versus Erratic Portal is just the 4 flat, I think, every time.
I think it's 4 to cast, but 1 to activate.
I'm looking right now. 1 to activate, you are correct. And it still has the same clause. They can pay 1 if they don't want the effect to happen.
Yeah, it's just ways, because you have an option of doing either. So you could start bouncing their stuff to play more of a tempo route, and force them to tax them out of their mana and stuff, but not really where you want to be. I'd rather be bouncing my own stuff to get those, shenanigans of what the deck's trying to do and the synergies, in your own deck.
Yeah, awesome. Any other artifacts you want to talk about here, Chris?
Any more than I want to talk about? The only other thing, the only thing that crossed my mind with this is, seeing how you're talking about power creep and stuff like that, you could tweak this deck a little bit more because there are a lot of creatures in this deck. This, You know, like when I first saw the deck pop up and I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh gosh, that many creatures. Are we playing a Persistent Petitioner's deck? But we're not. So you could cut some of the creatures and actually add mana rocks to kind of smooth out things so you can get more cards out faster to get the system rolling in general.
Yeah. That's a great idea. There are some creatures that aren't rogues, but play into the Zareth ability, so I get why they're in here, and we'll cover those later in the show. Okay, so let's move on to instants, Chris.
All right, we have 6 instants. We have Aetherize, Arcane Denial, Familiar's Ruse, Mana Drain, Negate, and Swan Song. So from the looks of it, it is, guess what? We're just going to counter a bunch of stuff and Aetherize, of course, just return all attacking creatures. This package, when I'm looking at it, this also leads me to believe that this was more of a precon, just slightly tweaked, because there's no Cyclonic Rift in here, but there's a Mana Drain type of deal. Like personally, I'd rather have Cyclonic Rift over Aetherize, unless you're trying to dodge that type of power creep. That's just personally me, but it's up to you with that one.
Yeah, Rift, at least you can bounce your own thing.
I do believe, as long as you don't overload it, I think it's just return target permanent to its owner's hands. Pretty much a boomerang for one color.
Nope, you don't control.
Okay. So, well.
Raph, cut that.
Yeah.
Cut what I just said.
No, leave that in there, Raphael. Leave it. Max has got to get blasted on Twitter, too. Every time I say that, though, Raph, you can leave this in right now. I'm going to go on a tangent.
Oh, gosh.
So, I always talk about people blasting me on Twitter for when I screw up. I have yet to have it happen, and I love all of you for not doing it.
You need to figure out a better phrase than blast me on Twitter, I feel like.
The way, because I think about it, it's like my phone goes blasting off and, when everyone starts blowing it up and stuff like that, so.
As our good friends from Canada would say, don't Google that.
Oh, Google, I love you.
Yeah, I agree, though. Going back to the deck, this looks like a slightly upgraded instant package, or maybe they're just things he likes to run. They're very efficient. Arcane Denial, Negate, Swan Song, Mana Drain, they're very efficient. They stop those big scary threats right away, and it's nice to see that there aren't 20 of these or 10 of these in the deck. There's 5,
yes.
Which I think kind of shows where that meta is. It's in that 6 to 7 range where you don't want to be playing, 10 counter spells. You want to let people have some fun and try to win a game.
Yeah, and I'm guessing, too, due to the, how he told us about the meta, that those counter spells are usually saved for when someone's like, oh, here's this combo piece, and they go to cast the other one, and you're like, no, we stop that right now.
Yeah. So my thought was, since kind of where a 6 or 7 power level deck is, you might be able to bump up and run a couple more of those 3 mana counter spells that have the extra bonuses of milling the opponent. So something like Thought Collapse, counter any spell, and then its controller mills 3 cards. It's 1 blue. It's a better cancel.
Yep.
And then there's Psychic Strike, which is 1 blue. You counter target spell, its controller mills 2.
Okay.
So just a couple more, ways to stop a big threat and then fuel the graveyard for your shenanigans.
Yeah, I've been seeing people play, I think it's a 5 mana counter spell from
the treasure one.
Yeah, the treasure one. I can't think of the name of it, but I've been seeing people play that more often too. And
Spell Swindle.
Yeah, and I don't mind getting countered by a card like that because they're just getting value out of it. Whereas Mana Drain, I'm always like, oh my god, that's so efficient. Oh, that sucks so bad. And that one, I'm just like, oh, yeah, 5 mana. Yeah, you can have all those treasures. That's fine. I guess I just walked right into that one.
I mean, I like Spell Swindle as well. If I walk into something where they've had 5 mana up, I kind of deserve it. I feel the same way about, like, Draining Welk, or what's the one Dana likes that you counter the creature, then draw that many cards.
Oh, I don't even remember.
Overwhelming Intellect. Yeah. There it is.
That's 6 mana.
If I walk into those, I deserve it, to be honest, so.
Agreed. So, a couple of them that I was going to suggest, and these are more of just a broad spectrum, is depending on which route you would take this deck. Because I have 2 theories in mind with this deck. Either a very effective ETB theory, where your creatures are really powerful with enter the battlefield effects, or other cards are, or you just stick more to the strategy of stealing stuff with Zareth San, and just focus dead on that one. So the 2, ideas I had was you can either start running more boomerang effects, which allow you to bounce your stuff or your opponent's stuff, or you just start going hard into the black removal, because it looks very lackluster in removal. So why not kill things and then just steal them with Zareth San later? Not to mention, obviously if someone gets a board state on you and you don't have the removal, there's not much you can do about it to get Zareth San through. So keeping the board clear is probably in your best interest as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, so I have a couple more removal type cards that are instants. The first one being Winds of Rebuke. It's 1 and a blue for an instant. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Each player puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into their graveyard. So another way to get Zareth San back into your hand and mill everybody at the same time, including yourself.
Yep.
And then the other one is Grizzly Spectacle. 2 black. Destroy target non-artifact creature. Its controller puts a number of cards equal to that creature's power from the top of their library into their graveyard. This card, when Dana and I were on the Scrap Trawlers stream for the Budget Brews, in both nights we played, I think that card was cast between the 2 Rexiel decks 6 times each night.
I suppose, and then Rexiel attacks the other player and then takes that card and cast. Oh, that's disgusting.
And it just goes back. Dana and Nick just went back and forth with it. It was great. It was really fun. It made for good TV.
I don't know, but yeah, probably good TV, but bad games.
I mean, budget decks with legends from the original Zendikar block, so it was a lot of fun.
Gross.
Okay, on to sorceries, Chris.
Sure, sorceries. They are hiding on my Architect. Where did they go? Oh no, I can't find them. Oh, there they are. They're down in the bottom. Because there are only 8 of them. We have Distant Melody, Kindred Dominance. Wow, yeah, butter tongue there. Maddening Cacophony, Notorious Throng, Paranoid Delusions, Reanimate, Rise of the Dark Realms, and of course, everyone's favorite, Windfall.
So to me, this looks great. I don't know what else I would add or take out. There's mill cards, there's make a bunch of rogue cards, there's, a board wipe or 2. So I think this is good. Chris, what do you think?
I can add about 6 cards into here, right off the top of my head. We have, let's see, can't even think of the names of them now. So we'll just go, take an extra turn, take an extra turn, take 2 extra turns, take an extra turn. So all the extra turn spells I would consider putting in here. Now, I play these in my personal mill deck. And it doesn't bother me per se, because I'm not a big person who likes to see people take a bazillion extra turns and all that. So you don't abuse the effects by any means. You just use it as the one-ofs, if I get the card, I cast it, and that's what happens with it. Because if you're going to play a mill deck, you need as much help as possible. You need as many turns as possible because an aggro deck can just overtake you. You have almost 300 cards you have to mill in a game. So you need as much help as possible. So having those extra turns to mill more stuff over and then get other cards with Zareth San, I don't think it's really cheating or scumbagish or anything like that to go that route.
Yeah, I think that you make a great point because your mill deck is more petitioner based.
Yes.
So you want those extra turns because you want to untap 12 petitioners and tap them all again and keep looping that.
Yes.
Where this deck isn't 100% mill, but it's, maybe 50-50. Those extra turns are just going to either allow you to get more stuff, mill more stuff, or hit more with Zareth San, and that's what you really want to be doing here.
Yeah, because, the creatures in this type of deck are really weak, so it's not like you have an Alpha Strike turn where you can just obliterate an opponent. So you need as much help as possible with that, so why not just, I'm not saying put all 8 whatever sorcery ones that there are in here. Put 1 or 2 or 3 of them in there and see how it goes for you.
Right. And you could even do something like Nexus of Fate, which is an instant that just gets shuffled back in, so you will eventually find it again.
Yeah, and that could give you a combo. When you run that with Mesmeric Orb, that just becomes a combo because you mill yourself out and you're just like, oh, now I hit Nexus of Fate, goes into my deck. Oh, now I hit Nexus of Fate, goes in the deck. Oh, now I hit Nexus of Fate, goes in. I draw. Oh, it's Nexus of Fate. Play Nexus of Fate. Take another turn. It's dumb to do it that route. I might have done it a few times, but it's still something that, since you're saying that there are combos within the game, the meta that you're playing in, it wouldn't be bad to actually have one in your deck as well.
For sure. Okay, what is next on our list, Chris?
Next on our list, sorceries, enchantments.
Okay, so there are 6 of them. Animate Dead, Aqueous Form, Court of Cunning, Curiosity, Psychic Corrosion, and Reconnaissance Mission.
All good ones, too.
All great ones. Court of Cunning, I have not had a lot of luck with the court cards from Commander Legends.
I won with that card once in my Petitioner's deck.
And that's what I hear from a lot of people is the blue one is probably actually an all-star because it's only played in these very specific decks.
Yep.
Where I run the white one in a couple decks and I always draw it and I'm like, well, I have nothing to protect from being the Monarch. I'm going to lose the Monarch the minute I play this card. So my personal experience with a lot of them is they're becoming dead cards usually when I draw them, but in a mill deck, I don't know if you really care about being the Monarch, as long as you can continually mill someone at your upkeep.
True, and if you are the Monarch, it is what it is, you get extras. But as for what you're saying with, like the Monarch, I have been noticing that people have been shying away from it, but I still like the sub-theme of it, because even if you are the Monarch, someone takes it from you, and it actually pulls the target off of your back, because everyone else wants to fight over the Monarch. So then you can sit back and just do things, because I play a couple of Monarch cards in my Mogus deck, and that's what I've noticed is, due to that simple fact, it's actually another protection card for me, because everyone's fighting over the Monarch, hitting other people, and I just sit back and start building up other things on my board state.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I love the sub-game the Monarch brings to a pod. I just don't think I'm playing the right cards to give me the Monarch.
But the white one is really good, because you still get spirits out of it, man. You still get the spirits. You may not get the angels, but you get the spirits at least.
Correct. Okay, so out of these, Animate Dead's great, bring something back. Aqueous Form guarantees something's getting through. Court of Cunning mills, and if you're the Monarch, they mill 10 cards instead of 2. Curiosity is an enchantment that when the creature deals damage, you draw a card. Psychic Corrosion says when you draw a card, each opponent mills 2 cards, and then Reconnaissance Mission is whenever a creature you control deals damage to a player, you draw a card. May draw a card. That's very important, because Coastal Piracy does not say may.
Sure doesn't. So I have a couple of suggestions that I would put in here. Another one is just plays into the mill theme, but is something that you don't have to put anything else into once it hits the battlefield, and that's Memory Erosion. It is a 3-mana enchantment, 1 colorless and double blue, and it says whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player puts the top 2 cards of the library into their graveyard. So this doesn't have to resolve the spell. And it's a cast trigger, so then they mill before the spell even hits the battlefield. So for them just casting, playing the game, you're just milling them and you're getting value to do your other things. And those are the cards that I look for when I personally build a deck, is anything that's going to just affect my opponents when they're playing the game, and I don't have to put anything into to affect them. So this is, these are going to be a lot of my suggestions are going to be around that route.
Yeah, I did the same thing with my suggestions for enchantments. I have 2 cards that are all about the mill. Sphinx's Tutelage. Whenever you draw a card, someone mills 2, and if they share a color, they do it again.
Yep.
The other one I have is Drowned Secrets. This is 1 in a blue. Whenever you cast a blue spell, target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into the graveyard, and this deck has almost 40 blue spells.
Yes, I like that one a lot.
So that feels like it should go right in.
Agreed. Another good one that I was, I've been playing around with this one, and I haven't seen it on the battlefield per se in my deck. I think I've seen it once and it got removed right away, was Teferi's Tutelage. Comes into play, you draw and then discard, and then whenever you draw a card, target opponent mills 2 cards. So it's just another aspect of an enchantment that just sits there, that for doing nothing, because you're going to draw a card every turn, someone's going to mill 2 cards. So something that just protects you, in general, so you don't have to put any mana into it and just play the game.
Yeah, that's a great card. Okay, so I think that just leaves creatures, Chris.
I know, because guess what? This is another deck that we've gone into with no planeswalkers.
Which is perfectly fine.
Why? There's no Ashiok in here. There's no
Narset. Think about it.
No Jaces.
The newest Ashiok exiles all opponent's graveyards. We don't want that in this deck.
Well, see, that I wouldn't even use it. I would just cast it and let it sit there and say, hey, I have a Stranglehold. You can't tutor your deck anymore. That's the biggest key aspect of the new Ashiok, is the ability not to tutor your deck. You can still tutor, but your opponents are locked out.
True, you can tutor, yeah.
Yep. And granted, yes, it's nice to exile graveyards. This deck doesn't want to do that, and most mill decks do, but the ability to just stop them from tutoring is amazing. But I mean, any of the blue Narset's really good. The other Ashioks are pretty good. The 4-mana Jace is pretty good. The 1 colorless and triple blue, because you get to mill or draw and discard.
The Labman one?
Yep.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. A couple of the other Jaces aren't bad. They're just nice little, card draw engines. Or even a bounce engine, I do believe. The 5-mana Unraveler Secrets, I think it is, can bounce any creature, I do believe. I don't think it says opponent. I think it's any creature. So, I mean... Overall, Planeswalkers are really powerful. I'm not sure if this is the route that the deck's going, but it's something to look into if you feels like this deck is just missing something in it. And sometimes Planeswalkers are the thing that can fill in that void.
Okay. That great advice.
All right, well, let's hit the creatures up. How many creatures we got in here? Like 75, I think it was, right?
28, but close.
I know. See, that's why I thought this was a Petitioner's deck. 28 creatures. It caught me off guard.
Okay, so there are 28. We'll go through them all and then touch on a few of them individually.
Okay.
We have Anawan the Ruin Thief, Burnished Heart, Fairy Imposter, Fairy Vandal, Frog Tosser Banneret, Glasspool Mimic, which also is a land on the backside, Invisible Stalker, Keeper of the Keys, Keymaster Rogue, Looter Ilkor, Meringue River Prowler, Merfolk Wind Robber, Nighthawk Scavenger, Nightshade Stinger, Nightveil Sprite, Notion Thief, Opposition Agent, Quickling, Slitherblade, Soaring Thought Thief, Solemn Simulacrum, Spark Double, Stink Drinker Bandit, Sir Conrad the Grim, Thada Adel Acquisitor, Thieves Guild Enforcer, Thieving Skydiver, and Vargoth Blood Sky Sire.
Mm-hmm. Quite a few rogues in here.
I think all but 5 are rogues, yes.
Yep. Along with a lot of these creatures have other abilities built into them, such as, where was it? Fairy Imposter, enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you return another creature you control to its owner's hand. So you're bouncing your commander or something else that you really need. Quickling does the same thing, comes into play, bounce another creature to your hand type of deal, which are all good recurable aspects for your commander. And after when I went through this and I looked at it and seeing all the bounce things, that's what led me to believe, why not play a more powerful ETB package so you can start abusing them a little bit while still having the mill aspect and other things in here. The deck seems a little torn in different directions because you're so focused on so many things to bounce a general in, back to your hand or whatever, so you don't have to cast out of the command zone and do all that fun jazz and everything. So it makes it hard when the general is so unfocused because he requires so much, but he's actually in the command zone, whereas you actually need him in your hand.
Okay, yeah, and I liked this. I like focusing on the rogues to really abuse Zareth ability. I do think there could be some changes or even maybe better rogues that could be in the deck versus what's here currently.
Okay.
My first suggestion is actually not a rogue, but it does play, it's a creature with evasion, and it deals with the mill aspect, and that's Mirko Vosk, Mind Drinker. He's 3 blue and a black for a flying 2/4 vampire, which is legendary. And then when it deals combat damage to a player, that player reveals cards from the top of his or her library until he or she reveals 4 land cards, then put those cards into their graveyard. It's EDH. You could go a lot of cards before you see 4 lands, or you could just hit 4 lands off the top.
And either way, it's 4 lands.
Right. Oof. I love this card. This is great. I played it in, back in Dragon's Maze time, but I think that would be great in this deck.
Agreed. The biggest card, I have just one creature that I was going to suggest for this, and that's just to make things get through easier, and that's Thasa, God of the Sea. So Thasa God, the original Thasa, so she's a 5/5 for 3 mana, and has an activated ability of 1 colorless and a blue. Creature is unblockable this turn. So allows you to get through, allows you to peg through with something. You don't have to worry so much about the other stuff. And it's just another repeatable one, which is what I'm always trying to find, are ways to repeatably use something that's hard to remove. Well, Thasa's indestructible, so it's very hard to remove Thasa from the field. Not to mention, we were discussing, you have so many blue pips and stuff that a lot of times this could just turn Thasa on, because she only needs 5 devotion to become online. And now it's a 5/5 indestructible beater or blocker if you could ever need that.
Yeah, very true. I never thought about Thasa. That's a great idea. I have a few more, and most of them are rogues. The first being Agent of Treachery. This is the 7 mana, 5 blue, 2/3 rogue. When it enters the battlefield, gain control of target permanent. You're already taking people's stuff, now take it from the battlefield. And then at the beginning of your end step, if you control 3 or more permanents you don't own, draw 3 cards, which, if you're using Zareth, you probably own a bunch of stuff that you don't own. And with the suggestions we've made, like putting in the Crystal Shard or the Erratic Portal and the other bounce or boomerang effects, you can get Agent back into your hand or make it unblockable with Thasa and then put it back, with Zareth's ability, and then cast it next turn and just keep stealing stuff.
Yeah, that is pretty gross. Once you said that, I'm like, oh no.
My next rogue is Black Bloom Rogue. And this is a 3-mana rogue. It's a 2/3 body, and it's also a land on the backside that enters tapped and produces black mana. It has Menace. So right there, that's a great way to get damage through, or make sure it can't be blocked to maybe sneak Zareth in. And then it also says Black Bloom Rogue gets +3/+0 as long as an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard.
That's really
an
good.
Opponent.
Yeah, that's
so it's
really
not
good.
the one you're attacking, it's anybody. So, I mean, a 5/3 for 3, most likely, is awesome.
Yes, that's really good. Yeah, I suppose if you want to go more on the rogue route, then I can see other ways of flip-flopping this deck too, to give more of an anthem theme to him, to make the rogue stronger, more other, like, some equipment stuff that could go on, because I do believe there's I think it's a 3-mana equipment, 3 mana to equip, but if a rogue enters the battlefield, you can automatically equip it, so that could be something to think about, and I think it gives it fear or something like that. I'm going to double check all that.
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind was Rogue's Gloves, but that's not the card you're talking about.
Cloak and Dagger is the name of the card. So it's a 2-mana cast, 3 mana to equip, and it equip creatures +2/+0 and has Shroud. And whenever a rogue enters the battlefield, or it comes into play as it reads, but whenever it enters the battlefield, you may attach Cloak and Dagger to it. So another thing to just follow theme if we wanted to go more of a rogue theme. Not to mention it gives a bonus plus Shroud, so it could protect your commander as well. Now Shroud kind of hurts because you want to target it to give it unblockable and stuff. But at the same time, ways of making things stronger is always good, and free equip is even better.
Well, yeah, that's super nice, especially if you flash Zareth in. It's going to auto-equip to it.
Yep.
Punch in for 2 more damage. The only issue is how do you get Zareth back to your hand because of the Shroud clause, without paying the 3 mana to move it to something else, or just play another rogue, because there's, 20 of them in this deck.
Yeah, and then you can automatically swap it over to another one, and
be
good to go, because, a lot of the 1 mana ones, it's just 1 mana, free equip, okay, now I bounce, and by that time you've already paid the 3 mana that would have regularly been in the equip cost, and then recast your commander or something like that. It is pretty cool.
Yeah, a couple others I was going to recommend was Rankle, Master of Pranks. This was from Throne of Eldraine. It's 2 black for a 3/3 with flying and haste. It's a rogue. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, choose any number of the following abilities. Each player discards a card. Each player loses a life and draws a card. Each player sacrifices a creature. I mean, everybody discarding card fuels graveyards. Everybody sacrificing a creature fuels graveyards. If you need to draw cards, let everybody draw a card.
Yeah, I mean, you have the Anthem in the creature already and Soaring Thought Thief. I mean, maybe Rogues is the way to go with this deck. And then just have the sub-theme of stealing things. Instead of worrying about mill, you can kind of pull away from mill, because naturally cards will hit the graveyard. So you could just leave Zareth San sit there, and then when needed, he can come out and do stuff. So that might actually be a theme to go, and I actually see that deck probably playing more efficiently going that route.
Yeah, and, if you go that route, you could maybe put a few more, mass reanimation spells in here besides what was already in here, the Rise of the Dark Realms. There's the new Mythic from Zendikar. There's a bunch of really good reanimation spells that have come out in the last few sets, including, Modern Horizons 2, which would really work well in here.
Exactly. Yeah, I really like the idea of Rogues. Thanks for looking into that hard, Max. That's really changing my mind, on how this deck should play.
No problem. You know me, I like battle cruiser magic, so I just like turning stuff sideways. That's what I'm here to do. My final one would be Gonti. Again, love Gonti. You're stealing stuff already, and I believe he is a rogue.
Yes, he is a rogue.
So, and again, we've talked about adding more of those boomerang and bounce effects to get your stuff back. Worst case, you make him unblockable. You flash in Zareth Sand, and next turn you recast Gonti, or even your second main phase, and you get to do the Gonti ability again of looking at the top 4 cards of somebody's library. You keep one, and then you can cast it at any time by using any mana to cast it.
That's pretty good. Yeah, that is really good. Gonti. I forgot about that card.
I haven't seen Gonti in quite a while just because it's a pain to do over virtual EDH, but I always like playing against Gonti decks in person.
Yes, it's actually really fun because you never know exactly what card it is that they stole from you, and then it comes out and it's like, okay, that's not as bad as I thought it was, or it's like, oh no, that is as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Okay, Chris, any final thoughts on Sean's deck here?
Final thoughts are, I would like to see you try to push this deck in one way or another, and try not to be so split down the middle of what you want to do. I know Mill's really fun, but Mill is a very hard deck to play and you need to focus more into it than just a few pieces. Now, if you want to go the rogue route, like what we were discussing, you almost seems like you already have majority of the pieces here, so it's easier to swap into that route. So I'd like you to see you focus one way or another, and I think the deck would just play 100 times better for you. Now, on the aspect of people, arch enemying you as mill, that's just what's going to happen. There's no dodging it. Even I run into that. You just got to kind of, take the punches as they come at you and hope that you can withstand everything.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think this deck could use a little bit more focusing, especially if you're seeing your local group kind of power creep into that 7 to 8 level, or that even maybe a solid 8 level, because if I were to show up with a deck that had, 3 or 4 different paths in it to an 8 power pod, and that's what I just get stuck playing in, you're going to realize quickly that you need to make changes to the deck. Like, you're not going to be able to hang with that crowd for very long.
Yep.
Unless you just get, the nut draw once in a blue moon. Maybe you get lucky. I personally, like I said, I love the combat step, so I would focus more on the rogues and doing stuff like that, because there's a lot of stuff you could do. You could do more rogues, you can do, the anthem effects, and, some reanimation, and it allows you to put maybe more draw into the deck and more removal versus focusing on the mill aspect.
Yeah, because I would cut a lot of cards if you cut out one of the two aspects and then added other things. Yeah, because, that's one thing we didn't touch on with the deck is, the minimal amount of card draw in here, and you're playing blue, which is the best color in Magic for drawing cards, so you have the option of playing so many good ones that if you cut a few things, it would probably just speed up the deck overall.
For sure. Okay, Sean, thank you so much for sending us your deck list, and thank you so much for supporting us on Patreon. We greatly appreciate it. And thank you to everybody else who listens every week on their podcast platform of choice, gives the thumbs up, the YouTube comments. We greatly appreciate it. And just everybody else who supports us on Patreon or comes and meets us here in Eau Claire to play some games with us. We love it. So thank you, everybody. If you want to get a hold of us, you can reach Dana on Twitter at Dana Roach. You can find myself at CMDRCentral_Max. And you can blow Chris's phone up, or blast Chris's phone at YSquishy1. You can talk with our editor, Rafael Garcia, at Ursa Bearwalker. And our podcast theme song is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. We will be back next Monday with a brand new show, and hopefully all 3 hosts. But until then, I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.